MGM Plus just confirmed something that changes how every From fan needs to watch this show. Season 5 is happening, and Season 5 is the last one. 5 years of a nightmare town that eats people alive is finally getting an ending, and creator John Griffin already told us where that ending is heading. He called it Endgame. So I did the only reasonable thing an obsessive From viewer can do with that information. I opened up Season 1, Episode 1, and watched the pilot again with 4 seasons of context sitting in my head. And here's the thing that makes this rewatch different from every other one online. The writers themselves said in their own Reddit AMA that the pilot holds more answers than most viewers realize. That's not a fan theory. That's John Griffin and Jeff Pinkner telling us directly to go back and look harder. So I looked harder. And I found a lot more than a few coincidences. Let's start with sound, because From uses sound like a weapon long before it uses monsters. Early in the pilot, the jukebox at Colony House starts playing on its own right after Sarah touches the talisman for the first time. 3 seasons later, we learn exactly why that matters. Sophia turns that same jukebox on deliberately, using the noise to pull the creatures toward the diner and away from the people she's protecting. Which means the show planted a functional piece of town mechanics in Episode 1 and waited 3 years to explain what it actually does. The track playing is a 60s rock song built entirely around wanting to escape somewhere that traps you. I won't get into the actual lyrics here, but if you know the song, you already know it lines up with Fromville in a way that feels too specific to be random. That's not an accident. That's a writer's room with a very dark sense of humor. Now, let's talk about the talisman itself, because this is where the pilot gets genuinely unsettling in hindsight. Boyd finds a talisman lying on the ground and picks it up, almost as an afterthought. No explanation, no ceremony, just a man noticing something on the dirt and grabbing it. There's a theory that's circulated in the fandom for years, and it holds up better with every new season. The theory is that Julie placed that talisman there herself during one of her story walks, specifically so Boyd would find it. Here's why that one detail matters so much. Because Boyd had that talisman in his pocket, the Matthews family survives their first night in the RV after the crash. Because that night goes differently, Fatima later knows a talisman can protect an enclosed space, which is exactly the method she uses to save herself and Ellis during the Colony House massacre. Because Boyd understands how talismans function inside a structure, he and Sarah go looking in the woods, which leads him into the well, which leads to Martin, which leads to killing Smiley, which leads to Fatima's pregnancy, which, depending on how you read Season 3, might be the actual reason she eventually turns into something else entirely, and all of that traces back to one object on the ground in Episode 1. Season 4 pushes this even further. Jade and Tabitha spend the finale trying to get bones out of the tunnels before they run out of time, because the show has spent 4 years establishing that proper burial is the one thing that might actually break this town's curse. One talisman on the ground in the pilot is now, 4 seasons later, connected to whether an entire family survives, whether a woman becomes a monster, and whether anyone gets buried correctly enough to matter. That's not a coincidence chain. That's a writer's room building a domino effect and trusting the audience to eventually notice the first domino. There's a second through line in the pilot that gets overshadowed by all the monster chaos, and it's about fathers. Boyd tells Frank flatly that a man protects his family. It plays like a throwaway line about Frank's paranoia in the moment. Then you rewatch the whole series and realize almost every major relationship in From circles back to a parent who couldn't protect their kid. Lou can't protect Kenny because of his condition. Tian Chen is later killed, leaving Kenny without him too. Boyd and Ellis barely speak in this episode, and we eventually learn why. Ellis begged his father to stay home because Abby was sick, and Boyd left anyway, and Boyd is the one who ends up having to kill her. When Boyd says that line about protecting his family, there's a real chance the anger in his voice isn't really about Frank at all. It might be about his own guilt. This matters even more once you remember the show's actual central mystery. The town exists because parents sacrifice their own children to strike the original bargain. Every strained father in this pilot is a smaller, human-scale version of that same failure. From keeps telling you the theme before it tells you the plot. Now, funerals. The pilot spends real screen time on burial, and once you know how the town works, that choice stops looking like filler. The boy in white tells Victor that if he can't bury every body, he should at least bury one personal item per person instead. Donna keeps asking Boyd whether Roger has been buried. Boyd keeps putting it off, and because Roger never gets buried properly, Sophia is later able to resurrect him and use him to spread panic through Colony House. The pilot is quietly setting up a rule the show won't fully explain for years. Bury things properly, or the man in yellow gets a weapon out of your carelessness. That rule is exactly what's on the line in the Season 4 finale. Jade and Tabitha aren't just grabbing bones for the sake of grabbing bones. They're trying to finish what this pilot warned us about in Episode 1, using a method the show planted before most viewers even knew there was a rule to follow. Here's something the writers actually confirmed that most rewatch videos get wrong. The murder of crows scene, where Julie tells Ethan about crows that hunt the people who spot them gathering, isn't ambiguous corvid imagery. The writers confirmed directly in an AMA that those birds are specifically crows and not ravens. That distinction matters because crow folklore is built around memory, retaliation, and marking a target permanently, which lines up disturbingly well with how this town treats anyone who ends up on its radar. Once you're seen, you don't get forgotten. Once you're chosen, the town keeps circling back. And there's one more piece of confirmed information worth knowing before Season 5 even starts. The writers have said the spider imagery running through the entire show isn't decoration. They've confirmed its meaning becomes clearer in the final season. So when the pilot ends with Ethan having a seizure, and the very next episode he wakes up describing a drawing on a wall interrupted by a spider dropping from the ceiling, that's not a random scare. Given what we now know about Julie's story walks, there's a real case that Ethan's story walked in that moment too, and that the show has been setting up his ability since Episode 1 without ever saying it out loud. Even the smaller details are getting confirmed now instead of staying theories. The missing motel sign that the camera lingers on during Boyd's walk through town. Writers were asked about it directly, and instead of explaining it, they turned the question back on the fans, treating it as a mystery they're intentionally keeping open. Given that Season 5's entire framework is being described as Endgame, that sign is almost certainly getting paid off and soon, which is really the whole point of rewatching this pilot right now. From isn't a show that improvises its mysteries. It's a show that plants a rule, plants an object, plants a line of dialogue, and waits years to cash it in. Every piece we've covered today, the talisman, the burial rule, the crows, the spiders, the motel sign, was sitting in Episode 1 the entire time, waiting for the town's final season to close the loop. So here's my question for you. Now that you know production on Season 5 starts this summer in Halifax, are you going back to rewatch the pilot before it drops? And if you do, tell me what you find, because based on what the writers have already confirmed, I don't think we've caught everything yet. Before we get into the last stretch here, I want to talk to you directly for a second, because the subscribe button changes what this channel can actually cover. Every video like this takes real research. I go through writer interviews, Reddit AMAs, trade reports, and full rewatches before I write a single line, because I'd rather bring you something new than repeat what 5 other channels already said this week. If you've watched this far, you're exactly the kind of viewer these videos are made for. You care about the small details, you want the receipts, not a guess dressed up as a theory. So here's the actual ask. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications if you don't want to miss the next one, because there's a lot more coming. Season 5 starts filming this summer, which means casting news, set photos, and probably a few leaks along the way, and I'll be breaking down every piece of it the same way I just broke down this pilot. From isn't the only show getting this treatment either. This channel covers House of the Dragon, Silo, The Boys, and a good chunk of the MCU and DCU too, so if you like going scene by scene through a mystery box show instead of watching a surface-level recap, this is built for you. One subscribe does more for a channel this size than people realize. It tells the platform to actually put this content in front of other viewers who'd want it too. If any part of this video gave you a new way to look at a scene you've already watched 4 times, that's the entire goal, and subscribing is the easiest way to make sure you catch the next one. So here's my question for you. Now that you know production on Season 5 starts this summer in Halifax, are you going back to rewatch the pilot before it drops? And if you do, tell me what you find, because based on what the writers have already confirmed, I don't think we've caught everything yet.